The CGA Tour, a podcast unlike any other. Now your host, Calvin Alexander.
Welcome back to the latest episode of the CGA Tour Podcast. As always here, I'm your host, Calvin Glen Alexander. And on this episode of the CGA Tour Podcast, I've got Will Polk, Jake Carlson, and Patrick McDermott. So I had to take a breath before I introduced all three other guests here. But Jake, Patrick, Will, I'll just give a brief introduction here. Will went to the University of Oklahoma, or OU, if they can get their spelling back and forth there on the initials. Patrick went to UT, or University of Texas. And of course, Jake and I went to OSU. Well, I got to give you guys a little bit of crap. I mean, you guys win Bedlam, it seems like, every year, except for the years that count, which is the last one.
Hey, I'm always game for the banter now.
Yeah. Well, if you guys win every year except for the year that counts, which is the last year. So,
okay.
Yeah, that's how it is. But basically, here for the podcast, we're going to get to is Big 12 season predictions. We're going to go OU, Texas, and Oklahoma State season predictions. Touch a little bit on Baylor, and then cover the rest of the Big 12 kind of as a whole on how we think they'll do. And then we'll talk about the Big 12 football kind of expansion, who they should add in, how OU and Texas will fare in the SEC, and a couple more things here and there, I'm sure, as well. So, I don't know, do we want to get into Texas first? Patrick, you want to take it away here?
Absolutely,
What notable off-season additions and subtractions have happened this season?
Okay, well, let's get into the big one first. Arch Manning on the way. A big congratulations to the whole Texas football staff. Giant accomplishment to get Arch Manning there. Obviously, it creates a little bit of a power dynamic here because we have Quinn Ewers as well. That was the other big offseason move. So transferred in from Ohio State. The two perfect ratings from a recruit. The only other time that happened was with Vince Young, also a Texas Longhorn. So even though Quinn Ewers, he was originally committed to Texas, decommitted, attended Ohio State for a year, and now has transferred back. So that's huge. Everything coming out of the program is saying, it's an open competition, whatever, they haven't announced an official starter, but it's going to be Quinn Ewers. It has to be.
I want to make sure we get this though. Quinn Ewers is the quarterback on the roster, though. Arch Manning, great, you guys got him, but he's not here for a little
2023.
Bit, right?
Okay. Yep. Arch Manning, so he's committed. So yeah, anything can happen. We still got to keep him. Players decommit all the time. Players change their minds all the time. I don't think that's going to happen. He took a long time, visiting a bunch of schools, but there's reasons to be optimistic for Texas. We can dive into this year. Do you want to go ahead and go through the schedule real quick?
Yeah.
Okay.
Sure.
So, and I'll preface this, and I will take all beating on this, but I am a very realistic Texas fan. I feel like I go in with no expectations most of the time. This year is different. I am officially drinking the Kool-Aid on Texas, which I'm probably going to regret, but I can't, or it's hard to see a way that we don't have the best offense in the Big 12 and one of the best offenses in the country. The sheer amount of firepower is off the charts. I love what I'm seeing. A lot of our defense is really good players are going to be led by Overshone, the linebacker, Agent Zero. Absolute beast. But most of the rest of the defense is a lot of the same guys, just a year older. So we hope to see some improvement. But I'll get into the schedule now. Any thoughts from you guys on Texas before we get started? I want to get everybody involved. What do you guys see from an outside perspective?
A bad football team.
Bad. 5-7.
I just don't know how you're bringing back the same running back and the same wide receiver, but we're saying that this 5-star quarterback who Hudson Card, what was he? 4-star?
Yeah, I think he was the number two quarterback in the class or something. Yeah, big.
But we're saying in Sark's second year, and with Quinn Ewers, who, let's be honest here, has taken 2 snaps of college football, period, and neither were at the University of Texas. Both were in Ohio for Ohio State.
Yeah.
are going to all of a sudden transform the team. I'm not saying it's out of the question, but it just seems like there's a lot of unknowns with the team. And you're saying explosive offense. I'm not saying you don't maybe have the best receiver in the Big 12, or you don't maybe have the best running back in the Big 12. You probably do, honestly, running back wise. It's just this team was 5-7 last year, and then you add in the one addition that seems like the one big change is Quinn Ewers, which is just TBD. We don't know.
Okay. I mean, yeah, that's fair. And again, I am prepared to be proven wrong here because Texas burns me every single year. I will say last year's 5-7 was really bad, but we could easily have been like 8-4, which is kind of the problem. You know, Texas loses games that they shouldn't lose, either because of the opponent or just blowing leads at OU. Well, I'm sure we'll get into that. But
what are you, Nebraska?
Yeah. Speaking of which, yeah, we got them, or OU's got them back on the schedule, I think. But
that we do. Very intimidated.
Yeah,
it's not very intimidating.
I mean, it's in Lincoln, I believe.
Well, and Patrick, we have to get to this too. You guys have a big road game this year too. That's going to be really tough for you.
A big road game. Which one are you talking about?
You guys go play at Kansas.
Got us.
I queued up.
Got
there we go.
Not the snare.
Yeah, that's embarrassing. That's embarrassing. One of the darkest days of my 4 years in Austin was when we lost in Kansas with Charlie Strong. And then it happened again last year.
So
I thought it would never happen
this year. Yeah, what?
I mean, that one, at least I didn't actually watch the game. I think I was on a plane. I got off a plane and saw that we lost in overtime at home to Kansas. So there's no excuse for that. Moving on, because we can't move on quick enough from that. So Texas, I have Texas going 11-1 this year. I think Texas is the real deal. I think their offense is going to blow every defense in the Big 12 out of the water.
Wait, did you say 11-1?
I did say 11-1.
So who's the one loss? Who's the one loss?
So here we go. So I am choosing to be bold. I feel like last year I came in here and went a little bit chalk. You know, I feel like 8-4 was a little bit what was pretty much expected for Texas last year. 11-1. We're beating Louisiana Monroe at home to open the year. That if that doesn't happen, then we've got way bigger problems than winning the Big 12. I am going to go ahead and say that we beat Bama also. This is and it sounds crazy, but I want it to happen so bad that I'm committing to it. Texas is beating Bama at home. Thoughts from the panel?
It's just not going to happen.
Where's this Kool-Aid that you're getting? Because
it's delicious, Jake. It's delicious Kool-Aid.
I would like some.
You should try some.
Does it have
orange? Does it have
a very, very good spirit mixed in with it? Because man,
don't need it.
Beating Bama. Now, granted, it's at home, but like there are so many unknowns.
Does Bama reload basically every year? Sure, they do. Does Bama have a returning Heisman Trophy quarterback? Yes, they do. Even if I kind of had to think about it. I had to think about who won the Heisman Trophy last year because Bryce Young was not the most electric or exciting Heisman Trophy winner, in my opinion.
That's totally fair.
But
I mean, that's fair.
I think that's a very fair take. Yeah.
I think so. Yeah. So anyway, Bama lost a lot of guys. Their playmakers are in the NFL now. Is it possible they come in and absolutely beat the doors off of an inexperienced Texas team? 100%. But I'm taking the Longhorns at home.
So, I like to be an eternal optimist about Oklahoma State. And last year, there were several games where I go, oh my gosh, we're going to lose to Boise State. Spencer Sanders is 1 of 11 to run the ball, right? But then all of a sudden at the end, we're playing Baylor and we have 7 chances to score a game-winning touchdown and we couldn't do it, at the goal line. So there are peaks and valleys with the season, right? It's Bama.
We want Bama.
You maybe do. I don't know if we polled the entire Texas fan base and said you have $10. You're going to lose $10 if you bet on Texas. You're going to keep the $10 if you bet on Alabama. What are you going to do? And I don't know how many would go.
I can't win $10. I can only lose it or keep it.
Well, sure, you can win an extra $10. But for the sake of analogy here, a low stakes thing, I'm not sure how many Texas fans would go, yeah, I'm cool losing $10. And bet on my team.
And again, this will kind of, I think, segue into our later discussion. But as far as Texas joining the SEC, this is going to be the litmus test. Like we wanted to join the SEC, for the money. We won't talk about that, but we also want the competition. And if we can't handle Bama at home, like we know we got some work to do on this program before we join the SEC. Now, if we go in and if Bama comes to Austin and wins a close game, that's gonna be giant. That would be a way bigger deal than Joe Burrow coming in, 2 or 3 years ago. Bama is just different. Like everybody gets it. So I'm choosing to be the optimist here. With that being said, UTSA after that, also at home, tougher game than I think a lot of people realize. Like that's Jeff Traylor, the coach down there, great coach. That's a rising program.
You can't talk up UTSA after you're saying you're going to be Bama, though.
I know. That's fair. That's fair. After I'm
here, you talk up UTSA.
I'm saying their playmakers are gone.
Bama at home.
Yeah. Now, is Will Anderson going to absolutely blow up our offensive line? Quite possibly.
Yes.
But we'll see. Maybe we'll find a way to win.
A UTSA player. I mean,
UTSA
we losing to. That's I'm curious.
We're beating UTSA and we're beating Texas Tech on the road in Lubbock. Texas Tech, I think, is going to be in the bottom third of the Big 12. Like they have a new what's their coach's name? Matt Wells, I think. He's new. Who is it?
Joey McGuire.
Oh, there we go.
I'm pretty high on him, but I mean,
okay.
Like you said, this year, but this year they aren't going to be that great because it's Tech. They don't really have the base for that yet. But I do think for any Red Raider listeners out there, Joey McGuire is a great hire, and I think he might get them there.
Okay, fair enough. And they did lead the Big 12 last year in a lot of offensive categories. So like they always put up points. Texas is beating West Virginia. West Virginia is not going to be good this year. Like that's I'm not too worried about that. And I think
Will Greer coming in isn't going to help him out a little bit.
What is he back with the program in some capacity?
No, I'm kidding. Not Will Greer. Who's the California, like the guy who was at USC for a minute, and then he was at
JT.
JT, yeah.
The most overrated quarterback in the country.
Except for maybe, and I don't know, TBD, Quinn Ewers.
Oof. I mean, that's just being pessimistic. So I'll stick with my
not my team. So
yeah. You haven't drank the Burns Kool-Aid. Yeah, so then we come to OU, the Red River, and I think we get the win. I think OU is going to have a slightly down year, although I think they'll still be a good team. Like it's always a good program. Hate to admit it, but they are. Anything can happen in the Red River.
Where the one loss comes from.
That?
Yeah.
I'm ready to hear where the one loss comes from.
Because you said 11-1.
I'll skip over Iowa State. We're going to beat Iowa State, although I think they'll be pretty good again. Like their coach is excellent. Like, and this is going to sound like a pander pick, but I think Texas slips up against Oklahoma State on the road in Stillwater. That's a tough environment. Texas never plays well in Stillwater, especially not recently. And I think they drop a game in the Big 12. I really do. Like obviously, the easy way out would be to take us losing to Bama and winning out if I think we're going 11-1. But I still don't entirely trust Texas to get through a Big 12 schedule. Oklahoma State is a good team, and a road game in Stillwater, I think that's a tough environment, and I could see Texas slipping up there. Thoughts?
I know the sky will be black when you guys play Oklahoma State, as long as it's not a day game, granted.
Absolutely.
Right. Not that
I was going to say, I can't wait. I can't wait for it to be at 11 o'clock.
Yeah, 11 a.m. kickoff.
Take away the home field advantage there.
That's one game, yeah.
The home sky advantage.
Oh, yeah. But Oklahoma State is a 4-8 against Texas over the past 12 years, right?
Is that true?
Yeah. Excuse me. Wow. Texas is 4-8.
Oh, okay.
Texas is 4-8 against Oklahoma State.
I was going to say.
Sorry. Yeah, it's the other way around.
They say the record against OU, too.
I will get to OU in a second. But again, we're 1-0 over the past 1 year. So,
I meant with Texas, but I will give you OSU.
No, Texas' record is not great against OU recently either. So
here. Okay, so and then your guys are going through. You're saying you're beating at K-State, winning TCU at home, winning at KU, which again I could.
But yeah, by no means.
But I'm not going to.
Yeah, by no means.
Beat Baylor home, and then probably making it to Big 12 championship. So
yeah,
as someone who has, granted, a lot more friends and family members who go to Texas and OU versus any other school in the Big 12, I'll say this. I could easily see Texas being 9-3 this year, which is a huge improvement. That's 4 more wins on the season. But those 3 losses are, Bama, OU, and Oklahoma State, if I had to say it, right? I think you guys either beat Baylor or beat OU or OSU. Like, I think one of those 3 teams you guys beat. I wouldn't count, okay, for sure going to beat OU. That game is so much fun to watch every year, but I wouldn't count it. Oklahoma State game is so much fun for me to watch it as Oklahoma State fan because, again, we're 8-4 against you guys.
Correct.
But then there are some really just sad years, like against Vince Young when we're up at half by, it seems like 2 to 3 touchdowns, and then we lose in the second half. So I always still have those memories. But then again, the 13-9 game, Oklahoma State beats Texas now, which is a weird thing.
They figure out how to beat Texas all the time.
Weird thing for me to say. And then
or Baylor says turnovers and we lose.
Also, entirely possible. It's nice Oklahoma State doesn't open up their Big 12 season against Texas this year. I'll say it that way. But we'll get to Oklahoma State here in a second.
It feels like that happens a lot.
It does.
I don't know why.
It does. It does feel like that a lot. But that's what that year that we opened up against Texas for the Big 12, that's the year Jake's talking about where Sanders had 4 or 5 turnovers, whatever it was.
Was that 2 years ago, right?
Yeah, 2 or 3, yeah, because this is Sanders' 4th year. So I think 2, yeah, 2 years ago. But I could easily see Texas as a 9-3. I don't know if Jake and Will disagree necessarily.
Which, for the record, I would be pretty pleased with. But I'm choosing to go all in on Sark, and I think if Sark takes the leaps that he kind of needs to, or that a lot of people kind of think he will, I think that means beating OU and beating Bama, or at least giving them a crazy good game. Who's next?
I think. Go ahead. Some of the same points. I think Texas, like you said, does have the best receiver in the Big 12. I don't think it's really arguable even at that point. I think they have the best running back. Now, what I will say about Bijan Robinson is he's good, but I don't know if he wants to be there because there were rumblings about. Didn't he sit out last year?
No, he got injured.
So he got
injured, but then there were rumors about him transferring as well.
Yeah, but he quickly came out and said, "No, don't listen to that. I'm staying here." So I think there was people wanted him to transfer to USC, or one of these other kind of flashy on the rise programs, but
that would have been.
I feel like he quickly shut that down. But
so there's that, and him staying healthy. I think he is the best running back in the Big 12. Again, not really arguable. The defense is the one that I'm unsure about, which I'm sure same thing for you. And then
secondary, you were saying,
it seems like the only teams that ever really have good secondaries are either OSU or Baylor, and OU will have their sprinkle in of really good players, but Will, you can go in on Grinch here in a little bit.
I won't be talking about that, Coach.
You sounded like Bill Clinton right there.
That's the exact vibe I was going for. So good.
Yeah. I think that's the one thing I have about Texas. I think I wouldn't be surprised to see them make an over 500 jump. I don't think that's egregious. I would say 11-1 probably is a little out of my comfort zone on predictions. I would say 9-3 might even be a little my comfort zone on predictions. But I think that sweet spot of 8-4, I think that's probably where I would project Texas to be, and them be the team that beats the teams they're better than and loses to the teams they're worse than. I think that's
that will be Texas this year, because this isn't the most talented Texas team but they have a lot of really good players that I think can get them over maybe some of the games that they would struggle to finish in other years.
Yeah, I think so.
I'm curious to what, besides Sark and your two and Quinn Ewers, is there something else that sticks out to you like this is why Texas will be better?
I mean, Xavier Worthy, who we've mentioned, but I mean, like, he had such a crazy freshman year and is now only a sophomore. Like, we've got returners coming back, you know, on the defensive side of the ball. Like, a couple guys on the D line. Moro Ojimo is a year older. Like, offensive line is a year older. I just feel like these are guys that Sark kind of just worked with his first year, and are just all going to mature. We also got Billingsley, the transfer tight end from Bama. Like, there's guys to get excited about. So I don't want to hog the time for Texas. So someone from the state up north, you guys chime in here. Which team are we going to next?
I'd say we gotta hit up OU, because we could spend 5 hours with Oklahoma State. As Jake knows how long I could talk for forever here. But, Will, do you want to kind of take it away here with OU? I mean, there's a lot of offseason additions and subtractions, but rather hear the OU fan and alum say it than necessarily get my tainted and rimshot view here.
So, first of all, I didn't drop my Texas prediction. I think 8-4 is a good ballpark for that, for many of the same reasons as Jake. The O-line, yes, it is more experienced, but it was not good last year. Defense has issues with the secondary and pass rush, but I mean, obviously they're working on improving that, and they recruited like crazy on the O-line last year, but those guys are not going to be ready yet. So I see 8-4. I'm not going to get too much into that just because we probably should move on to another team. But I think that's a pretty solid improvement for year 2 for Sark. Anyways, moving on to OU. A lot has changed, as everyone is well aware. We don't need to go super into depth on that because everyone has talked about it ad nauseum the past 6 or 7 months. Honestly, the schedule is not that difficult this year. Most of the toughest games are at home: Baylor, Bedlam. Texas is obviously a neutral site. I have a couple that might surprise you that I actually am worried about a little bit. So, starting from the top, UTEP at home. I think we can all agree that's not anything to be worried about. Kent State at home. Also not worried about that. They do have a good run game, though, is what I've been told, but I'm still not too worried about that. Now, at Nebraska, as we mentioned, Nebraska is not a great team, but they were the victims of some horrible, horrible luck last year. I know our game against them in Norman came down to basically a final drive by Nebraska, which, of course, Adrian Martinez did not do that well on, but still think he's a good player, and I'm going to talk about him a little more in a bit, too, with K-State. Ultimately, I don't think the home field advantage is going to be enough for Nebraska to win that game, but I think it could be a lot closer than a lot of people, national pundits, fans of all teams, etc., included, think it could be. Just because, like I said, that's a team that was so unlucky last year. They have to regress to the mean at some point. You know what I mean? Like, I can't remember the stat of their Big Ten losses in the combined margin, but it was laughably close. Like, it was a laughably small number. So eventually it's got to even out, if that makes sense. But I still think OU takes that one. So we're at 3-0. Next, K-State at home. A lot of people have Kansas State as a sleeper pick for a run at the Big 12 championship, and I think that's mostly because they're kind of like Oklahoma State last year. They have a very experienced team, a lot of older guys that have been together for a while, playing together. They picked up Adrian Martinez in the portal, who I think is a good player. I think the Nebraska team failed him more times than he failed them, if that makes sense. Obviously, Deuce Vaughn is great. I think Bijan is obviously the top running back in the Big 12, but Deuce Vaughn is right up there with them. Just a different kind of play style, though, but I don't think anyone's going to disagree with that. I won't say that's a loss, but again, that's one that does give me a little bit of pause. And they have that one edge rusher, too. I can't remember his name, but he set like the single game Big 12 sack record or something last year. I cannot remember his name, but he's still there. He's still very good. But I think that could be close, but I think OU pulls it out at home. At TCU, Not too worried about that. I think Sonny Dykes is an interesting coach, but he's a snake. I have a lot of SMU friends, so they would be very happy to hear me say that.
I think they play each other this year too.
They do, and I am pumped. I kind of want to go, actually.
I was going to say,
kind of that K-State game, and a bunch of my buddies are asking me to go Boulevard with them and whatnot at SMU, and I think that'd be fun, but I think K-State's going to be a better game, honestly. But I think that's a win. I mean, TCU, that's a much longer rebuild process than other first-year head coaches will have. I mean, they lost Zach Evans, who arguably is the best player on that team. Didn't play a lot due to injuries, et cetera, and all. And I mean, if any of y'all followed his recruitment a couple years back, there's a lot going on there.
Yeah.
But lost him, best player on that team. I think Chandler Morris is a pretty good quarterback. I mean, I think he can do well, but I don't know if he's going to start. They have Duggan is his name, the quarterback.
Yeah, is he still there?
I think he's the incumbent starter. If he's still there, I might be wrong, but I think the better quarterback's going to be benched then if he's there. But I don't see them being too much of a threat. Texas is going to be a big one. Obviously, it is every year. And honestly, with that game, you can throw out the results of the season leading up to that. You can throw out last year and all. It's a brand new ball game every year. I mean, even the years that Texas has been bad, it was a hell of a game.
Exactly, yeah.
Last year. I mean, homer pick, yeah, that's a win for OU, but I could see that going either way. So can I count that as like an either or, if that makes sense?
Yeah. I'll definitely give you the toss up for sure.
Okay. Thank you for that.
That's what I'd put it down as. Yeah.
Okay. Kansas at home next week. We're not Texas. You don't have to worry about that. That's a dub. Easy enough. Bye week. That's easiest win in the book. At Iowa State, that originally was going to be on a Thursday night, which I would have been worried about that in that case, just because even coming off a bye week, that's such an upheaval of schedule and all. And Ames is always a tough place to go into and play, even when the team's not that great. But moving it to a typical schedule and all, the day after my wedding, actually, which I'm probably going to miss it because I'll be traveling, unfortunately. But not too worried about that one either. They just had so much turnover on the roster. I mean, Breece Hall is gone, Charlie Kolar is gone. Brock Purdy's gone, but I mean, we're not too worried about that.
I was never a big Brock Purdy guy. Yeah,
he just for the sake of throwing it out there, he did lead the Big 12 last year in passing yards, with 3,000 yards passing. So I'm with you. I don't know. I wasn't ever that worried about Brock Purdy, but then again, Oklahoma State had a really good record against Iowa State, except for 2 years. So
it's just wild to me how Brock Purdy will. I mean, yeah, on paper, great player. He looks good when all cylinders are firing. But I mean, just every big game, there's some play that happens that's just wildly hilarious. And I don't know if y'all watched that bowl game against Baylor this past year they played in, where he basically lost the game on the last play of the game. And it was just the most ridiculous interception turnover possible. I mean, it just seems like that really pops up a lot with him, which I don't know what team he ended up on in the NFL. I think he signed undrafted, but good for him. That's awesome.
So I'm looking at his stats right now. As I can just tell you off the top of my head, he was, just because I'm looking at it, he was a 7th round pick to the 49ers.
Okay, good for him. He got drafted. Awesome.
Yeah.
That's a dub at Iowa State. Baylor, I'm torn also. I think, okay, so let me preface this by saying, obviously a lot of turnover on this OU roster. I really feel like there's a strong range of outcomes, anywhere between 9-3 and 11-1. I don't think that sounds too crazy. I would hope y'all would agree with that. So Baylor, again, I will put as a toss-up. I think I will list it as, even at home, as a loss right now. I think Dave Aranda is the best head coach in this league. I think Brett Venables might be, but we haven't seen him as a head coach yet. I just think Baylor, they have a lot of turnover on the roster, but they're just so well coached, such a tough team and all. That's really hard to
Is Gary Bohannon coming back?
No, he transferred to, I can't remember where, but
I wish he was coming
the
back.
kid that played y'all in the Big 12 championship as a starter. Aranda announced that pretty early.
Oh, right.
Yeah.
I mean, he looked pretty good for the majority of that game, I will say.
And Gary Bohannon transferred to USF, University of South Florida.
Okay.
Just trying to get some stats here.
Yeah.
I think OU could. I don't think 9-3 is out of the question. I actually don't think 11-1 is necessarily too far fetched. I kind of fall into the same thing here with when I was talking about Texas with Quinn Ewers. Like Dylan Gabriel back with Jeff Levy, who was his offensive coordinator when he's at UCF, but it just so many unknowns with OU. Like, how is Brent Venables going to be in his first year as a head coach, even though he's back at the place that he was at 10 years ago, right? Like, or 12 years ago.
Yeah.
So I'll keep going though.
I think I feel the same way. Obviously, there are a lot of question marks and a lot of unknowns, and a lot will be determined probably pretty quick once we get through the first 4 games or so of the season. Or maybe not determined, but it'll start looking a lot more clear, the answers to those questions we all have. I still think the roster is one of the top 2 most talented on paper in the league. That helps a lot. I mean, talent overcomes a lot in college football if you look at just the composite rankings and all. And I mean, I'm pretty bought in on Venables. Jake can tell you. I think there probably will be some growing pains given the first-year head coach and all, and I don't think it's very rare that a first-year head coach is going to pull what Lincoln Riley did in the first year as OU's head coach, immediate playoff appearance and all, just keeping things rolling and all. But I don't think that's out of the question, having a season like that for Venables. I just think it's a bit of a wild card, but I don't think it's going to be bad, if that makes sense.
I would also say I think OU makes the Big 12 championship game. I think it's a Texas OU rematch. And I'm with you. I do think they're closer to the 9-3, 10-2 realm this year. Because I'm not sold on the quarterback, but I do think I think you're right. There's no reason they should.
Are you more sold on Quinn Ewers with 2 snaps or Dylan Gabriel with over 70 touchdowns in college football so far?
I mean, the word "sold" is tough because am I sold? Like, I'm not sold on Quinn Ewers as a college quarterback. Like, it's absolutely possible for him to be a bust. I think I've just never seen Dylan Gabriel be great. Although to his credit, like he is a true veteran. Like he's been around. Like he's exactly the sort of plug and play guy that you want. And I think Brett, I don't see any reason why Venables can't be a great head coach. And I mean, OU's defense has been obviously their Achilles heel, like in their playoff seasons, where they can't stop anybody. So that's got to be, I think he was a home run hire, to be honest. And I don't quite know. I think it's probably the only job that would have taken him away from Clemson. But I think he works out. There's no way he has like a Sark type growing pains first season. Like, I just think the program is in a good spot.
I agree. I like hearing that from you.
I hate to say it,
no,
but yes.
I don't think a Sark year one is really even possible. I mean, I've heard a lot of takes like that recently, and then just look at like how consistent Oklahoma football has been over pretty much its entire history. There's been like one, I would say, bad stretch, like objectively bad stretch. Other than that, consistent winning seasons, playing for conference championships and all. Playing for national championships every once in a while too. I mean, I don't see this hire going poorly, especially at the start. I think we're going to hit the ground running. I think, actually, I'll move on with my game predictions and all. At West Virginia is a win. We kind of laughed at West Virginia a bit ago, and I'm not super bought in on them either. They lost a lot of their talent in the portal. I mean, JT Daniels, we can say he's a 5-star recruit and all, but I feel like he hasn't had the opportunity to live up to that, really. But when he's been given any kind of opportunity, it hasn't ended well for him or for his team. I guess he did lead Georgia to a huge 10-3 win over Clemson to open last season, but that's a pretty wild offense from them.
And a Clemson team that wasn't really any good.
Yeah. So I mean, they scored 3 points. I mean, DJ Uyunglele, I'm really proud of myself for that.
Yeah, I can't.
First try.
Uyunglele. I can't really enunciate.
You shouldn't have gone the second time. See, you just quit when you're ahead. Like the first time was perfect.
I was feeling myself on that.
He's bad.
That kid from Westlake, I think he's going to end up starting. there very soon. It'll be just like Trevor Lawrence, where they had was that Kelly Bryant that was ahead of him, Jake?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, he ends up transferring to Mizzou, right? Because Lawrence is the starter.
An exact just mirror of that situation. DJ is going to start the first couple games, not look great, but they open against Georgia Tech, I think. They don't play anyone tough the first couple weeks, but offense isn't going to be rolling. I don't know why I'm getting onto Clemson now. I'm really off on a tangent.
Yeah, Venables, the Venables.
The kid from Westlake's going to come in. They're going to look good. Clemson's going to be back to normal. Anyways, Bedlam at home. That's a dub. Sorry, Calvin and Jake. Honestly, I think that's the game I'm most confident about this year.
Well, if I were you, I'd be more confident about UTEP and Kent State, but I'm trying to make a joke too. You know, I mean, I get what
Chick guns.
Yeah,
it's just losing back-to-back Bedlams. That's probably pretty rare, and I think Venables knows that that's not acceptable at this point, given how the season ended with that game last year. And I think that's a win. And then at Texas Tech, again, we talked about Tech a little bit earlier. I think McGuire is a great hire. I think he's going to be great for them, but I think that's going to take time this year. That's a dub.
I'll say one thing about Texas Tech. That way we can kind of just go through these teams now versus all later. Texas Tech, to me, is going to make a lot of improvements as a team, but not their record-wise, right? I think we're all kind of agreeing there, as a team, they might end up getting a lot better.
They'll show flashes of growing and getting better, but ultimately I don't think they're going to compete for the conference or anything yet. I think down the road, especially when the Big 12 looks a bit pretty different in a couple of years, I think they might, which we'll talk about that, of course, in a bit. But right now, though, they're working on it, though.
So is that a 10-2 season, if I'm hearing you right? Losses possibly
one.
Yeah. I'm saying there's the toss-up game against K-State, right? And then there's
and like I said, anywhere from 9-3 to 11-1, I see being very possible. I think they're going to drop the game at some point. First year, brand new head coach, new defensive system, new offensive system, and all. Although the quarterback has played in that, was pretty prolific in the system, and that helps a lot with the rest of the team learning that. But there's just too much new. I know they'll drop a game at some point. Maybe 2. I don't think 3, but I think it's possible.
Gotcha. Well, Patrick, I'll let you go for here because I know where I'd take it. I think I know where Jake would take it. So I want to hear what you're thinking about OU's record here first.
Oh, I mean, I don't have much to add. I think in that range is super possible. I would think go a little bit on the lower end, totally impartially, of course. But I think 9-3 is probably more realistic. Like, I'm with you. I think there's a chance they lose to Baylor. Although I'm not as high on Baylor as maybe some others. I think Bedlam might be a more likely loss than Baylor. But yeah, I mean, I think they'll be in the Big 12 championship game, like New Year's Six bowl, strong possibility. Like, I don't know if this is a playoff team. Like, we just don't know. Like, some guys just don't work out as head coaches, and they're home run, coordinators. So we just don't know yet, but the writing on the wall seems to be they won't skip much of a beat.
I think, like you said, I don't think it's a playoff caliber team, but I think if the schedule falls at the upper end of what we're all predicting it could be, I think they could end up in there. I don't think that would go super well because I don't think they're ready for that just yet with all the turnover, but I think they could end up there. But I agree, I don't think it's a playoff caliber team, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So OU last year was 10-2 in the regular season. I mean, they 11-2 overall. They beat Oregon in the bowl game, but they were 10-2 last year. And I'm not necessarily sure how you feel about how last season ended, right? Because it ended weirdly, right? I mean, at the end of the day, like Oklahoma's after the Bedlam game,
unprecedentedly weird.
Everything falls off, as opposed to it actually the head coach changing positions at the end of the season, as opposed to just, I mean, I don't say mid-season, this is the last game of the season before the bowl game, but still. Nonetheless, here, the other OU fans that I talk about who went to OU, whose family goes to OU, I mean, I could throw out like Seth Fuller and some others who have been on the podcast before too, but even both Agnich brothers, Walter and PJ Agnich, were both going, oh my gosh, the sky's falling, OU's the worst, like this is crazy, whatever, da-da-da. It was from, I think at least, from we lost 2 games. So as an Oklahoma State fan, I got to say, it'd be nice if that was the sky's falling expectations for us. And I think Oklahoma State and the new Big 12 could build to be there. And now I am buttering you up here, Will, because I'll be honest. I don't know how you guys got better from last year. And I know you said 9-3. That's kind of, that's one of the spots. And that's where I would go too. But I do want to give some just stats here as I try to look into Dillon Gabriel and the whole entire OU offensive scheme and everything. There are a lot of guys who transferred. There are a lot of guys who left to USC. Spencer and Caleb both left, go into that, but their story's been told. Other offensive guys have left as well too, but I don't want to be mistaken. Dillon Gabriel's last season, where he played a full season, last year for UCF, he played 3 games and then broke his collarbone and was out. But in 2020, he passed for 3,500 yards. That would have led the Big 12 last year. The year before then, in 2019, he passed for over 3,200 yards. Again, would have led the Big 12 last year. So when Gabriel's healthy, he clearly can ball out. Now, if we want to say, that's against other similar opponents in UCF, fair. That's totally a fair point. But just kind of for context here, because I'm trying to play devil's advocate of, in my head, I don't want OU to be good ever, right? Like, I'm an Oklahoma State fan. So
that's fair.
Why do I think that OU would be good this year? Like, what's going into my mind as like an OSU fan of why am I worried about OU besides it just basically being OU and you guys beating us 16 out of 20 times in the past 20 times we played, right?
That does happen. So do you want me to respond?
Yeah.
The question basically is, why do I think OU would be better?
Yeah. I mean, or just the same even when so many differences have happened.
So I think obviously with the range of 9-3 to 11-1, middle ground there is 10-2, basically being the same results wise as last year. And I think being the median of those two, that's the most common outcome in my eyes. So being the same basically, well, I don't want to sound like sour grapes, but if you look at the offensive numbers from 2017 to 2021, there was a legitimate dip each year over year. And it started out 579.6 yards per game of total offense in 2017. Baker's Heisman year. That was the best OU offense I've ever seen. It was incredible. That was awesome. Dipped down in 2021. Obviously, there was a little bit of quarterback turnover, but I mean, the team was more talented than it ever was in 2017, 18, 19, whenever. Dipped down to 451.5. So the offense had been stagnating and all. I think Riley's a great coordinator, offensive game planner, head coach. Sure. Yeah. But obviously the offense has stagnated a little bit. And Jeff Levy, for all his anything we want to say about off field, I won't get into that. But on field, calling games and all, I mean, Ole Miss's offense was top 5 the last 2 years with him calling plays for them in the SEC against tougher opponents and all. I mean, total offense last year, 506 yards per game. OU was 451. That's a significant difference.
Still led the Big 12 though. That was still best in the Big 12 by OU. So.
Oh yeah, but what I'm saying is, if Levy's offense did that against better competition in the SEC, I think we can all agree on that. With lesser talent than OU had last year, or will have this year, based on rankings, composite rankings of players, etc., and all, why should I not think the offense would be better?
I would say I think OU's offense can be better, for sure. I think it can be, but Spencer Rattler did not play up to expectations at all last year for the first couple of games, and you guys kind of skated by, like, I don't want to say skated by necessarily, but like you guys were making it by the skin of your teeth in a couple of those games. I mean, you talked about it, like the Nebraska game barely won, right?
And
the Tulane game.
Incredible to end the 2020 season, and then the offense fell off the cliff in 2021. Even towards the end of Caleb Williams' time as a starter, the offense looked a little off.
Mm-hmm. And I would hope that would be true with any, true freshman quarterback coming in mid-season, he has flashes, but then all of a sudden something...
Pull a Texas game every single game of the year, obviously freshman growing pains and all.
Right, but I look at OU's record last year, and of course it's incredible as you got Kansas who would, if they could sniff a 10-2 a year, they'd be just killing themselves over it, right? So, and Iowa State would probably be happy with that year in, year out too. It's just another team I can mention. But the games you guys lost were, of course, Bedlam, kind of just a crazy game overall, right? Oklahoma State returns a kickoff for a touchdown. Several other things happen in that game that break right for Oklahoma State at the right times for us to win. Then the Baylor game where just things, again, kind of broke correctly for Baylor to win. So I'm not saying I think it's completely out of the
Aranda
question.
Straight up outcoached Riley in that game too. I think, like I said, I think Aranda's the best coach in the league, and I think obviously his team won the league last year. I think he was last year too. And like a lot of things obviously didn't break OU's way in that game, but overall I think it was just being outcoached, outplayed, out-hustled.
I'm really curious how Brent Venables does defensively with this team. Like with the OU team.
It's going to look different.
It's just a big curiosity, right? And I guess, I'll say this. I don't see OU losing more than 3 games. I mean, I just don't. I think that's also a combination here of the K-State game being tougher than normal, but a home game for OU. So I would give the edge to OU in that one with a brand new quarterback in his 4th game for K-State at least, right? I know it's brand new quarterback for OU too, but the home game advantage I'll give to OU there. The first 3, I'm going win against UTEP, win against Kent State. The Nebraska game I think will be interesting, but they just lost their starting quarterback to Kent State. So I'm going to say you guys beat Nebraska.
I forgot they picked up Casey Thompson. I completely forgot about that.
But. Which is a good pickup, but still, like, when you have a brand new quarterback and it's, to me, anything can happen, so I'm willing to give it to but Casey Thompson is not Dylan Gabriel. Let's just call it that way. So I give the edge to OU there. At TCU, I think TCU...
I'm higher on Casey Thompson the most, actually. I think he looked pretty damn good in that Texas game last year.
Yeah.
He's an Oklahoma kid, too, so I always had a soft spot for him, even being at Texas. But
yeah, his dad played at OU.
Yes, he did.
And I think... I never would have started Hudson Card last year.
He played at OU, but he also ran a drug house out of the dorm room.
That sounds like something that would fall... Sounds like something that might be alleged.
Oh, he's on the Sports Illustrated cover getting arrested.
Allegedly.
Well, no, that sounds more than alleged, yeah.
I mean, point being here is I'm going to give the edge to OU, right? Like, I'm just going to give the edge to OU Nebraska game. I think it could be super, super close, like you're saying, though, Will. But I'm going to give the edge to OU at Nebraska. I don't necessarily know why too much, besides I'm just going to give it to I think he's the better quarterback, and I think he's the better offensive coordinator, which is Jeff Levy. So, say it that way. The at TCU, and this is kind of a thing where a reason why I think OU will fare better in the Big 12 this year than I would normally think, is that you've got teams who normally give OSU at least fits, all taking step backs this year. TCU, we're talking about a quarterback season, maybe change to start the season here. Max Duggan not, coming back, still on the roster, but maybe they decide to go differently. Texas having a bunch of differences there. That could be one of the losses I'd say for OU, just because Quinn Ewers, but I still don't know. Sark in his 2nd year. I just so many unknowns there with that Texas team too. But then Kansas, Iowa State, West Virginia, and Texas Tech, right? Like those 5 teams, I just count as wins for OU. And then if I'm already counting UTEP and Kent State, that's already 7 wins right there. I'm just counting it for OU. I'm probably going to count all those wins for OSU here just half a second as well too. But more or less, the games I think could give OU fits are the Oklahoma State game, the Baylor game, and the Texas game. Like those 3 games. And then the K-State game is interesting. The Nebraska game is interesting. So there's 5 games for OU where I'm not just going, oh yeah, that's iffy. And of 5 games, I feel like OU can do at least 2 wins out of those 5 games, right? I would pick OU easily in those. And that's where I get that 9-3 record at, right? Like we're talking Nebraska, Kansas State, Baylor, Oklahoma State, and Texas. Those are those 5 games where I'm like, all right, I just don't know how I feel about OU in these 5 games, but I'd say they win at least 2 out of those 5. And that's where I get the 9-3 record for OU, and I don't think that's out of the question. I'm really curious and interested to see how the season goes, but Dylan Gabriel playing a full entire season, pretty darn good quarterback. It's not like he wasn't already at a different school they had transferred to this offseason when he thought he could start for UCLA. And I got to tell you, I know that during his offseason that Dylan Gabriel was a UCLA quarterback for like a week, if it was that long. But there are a bunch of UCLA fans who were really excited for Dylan Gabriel, as I know my mom's side of the family is UCLA fans. And I know at least one guy who works for UCLA football recruiting who goes, yeah, dude, we are really excited at having Gabriel for that week that they had him. Like, oh my gosh, this is going to be a huge upgrade over Dorian Thompson-Robinson, who returned, which is kind of why Gabriel left, because then they might be.
I think he's pretty good.
And so
DTR,
they still have their running back coming back, right?
Yeah, and I think DTR is pretty good.
Michigan transfer, right?
But there is, I mean, love to have him on the podcast, but he told me not to. He told me to be careful with his name and stuff. Just as far as like he works for UCLA football, and he goes, dude, we think Gabriel's a big upgrade, and so that means to me at least. All right, so if you've got a guy who's DTR's level, and you think Gabriel's a big upgrade over him, all of a sudden I'm kind of worried as an OSU fan how good Gabriel could really be with a dynamic offensive coordinator like Jeff Levy too. Not saying Chip Kelly's not a great offensive guy, but
yeah.
Man,
I mean, familiarity with the system also will help a lot in that aspect.
In that fact that, Gabriel's offensive coordinator when he was UCF, not the last 2 seasons, granted, because Levy was at Ole Miss, but still was was the same familiarity there with UCF for a year. So that's kind of where I see it. Patrick, do you have like a record? Did you say already for OU?
I'll go 9-3. Yeah. If you got to nail it down, I'll go 9-3. But and for the record, and I want to move on to OSU, but I'll give the range there for Texas as well. I mean, obviously, I do think us losing to Bama is a strong possibility. So I will go in the 10-2 to 11-1 range if that is allowed.
That we're saying that's allowed, but 10-2.
Okay.
I mean, you're saying you only lose to Bama and OSU. I'll take it as you're saying you lose to OSU, of course. But, Texas. All right, Jake, thoughts about OU real quick here before we move on to OSU?
I would say, like, for most OSU fans, I'm not never really concerned about them, but not particularly concerned about OU not keeping their stride. I mean, Brent Venables had arguably one of the best defenses last year with Georgia and us, especially based off statistics. So I that's take a massive step up. And I don't think he's gonna have that like Big 12 hangover thing where it's like, oh, we're playing Big 12 teams because we've seen him dominate teams that are just as good offenses. So I think the defensive side is a cause for concern per se. I'm not too concerned about the offensive side either because they bring in a good offensive coordinator who might be a POS, but that's neither here nor there. But I think Dylan Gabriel is probably the perfect quarterback to bring in for a new coach. Because he is a veteran, he can probably come in, just absorb an offense, and just move from there. So, yeah, I'm pretty on the same page as Will is with that. We'll get into OSU in a sec, but if I had to take a guess on who would win that game, I probably wouldn't pick OSU. Because I usually never do. Because the odds are usually in my favor not to.
Fair enough. All right, well, it's time for at least the OSU season prediction here, which, Jake, I guess I'm curious to hear what you have to say here on the OSU season prediction in just a second. But the big differences for OSU here this year is that we changed defensive coordinators. Jim Knowles, no longer with the program, unfortunately. He's moved over to take the exact same role as defensive coordinator with Ohio State. Instead, we have Derek Mason, who comes over to Oklahoma State from Auburn, which is, at least in every Oklahoma State fan's mind and eyes that I can hear of, a great move and a great way to go. The defense was the story there for last year for Oklahoma State, though. There were several games last year where we shut out Texas Tech. We held the opponents to a less amount of points that we could actually score enough to win. And our offense wasn't the greatest every game. I'll say it that way. I think that's putting it very nicely. But, we beat Boise State by 1, granted at Boise State, right? We beat K-State by 11, granted at home, all type of stuff too. But there are games where we definitely skidded by. Iowa State game, I really wish we could have pulled that one off. But still, at the end of the day, we went on a winning streak after that one, 5 games in a row, and we lost to Baylor in the Big 12 championship game, which I think is more annoying than the last game of the season because, of course, we beat Notre Dame. But with all that being said, great season for Oklahoma State last year, and what does happen to be great is that quarterback returns to Spencer Sanders, and, of course, head coach returns to Mike Gundy, and, of course, offensive coordinator returns to in Casey Dunn. But going through the schedule, I don't know how we keep playing Central Michigan. I'm cool with just not playing them going forward after this season. There's too many things that happen weirdly for Central Michigan. Oklahoma State, I believe, has lost 2 games to Central Michigan in like the last 10 years we played them. One at Central Michigan, then one at home where we really didn't lose, but we did lose on that extra forward down play.
Allegedly.
Great point. Allegedly. I'm going to say we beat Central Michigan this year. We are the runner-up Big 12 team last year, so I'm going to say we beat Central Michigan. I'm also going to say we beat Arizona State, possibly a future Big 12 team. And then I'm going to say we beat University of Arkansas Pine Bluff Golden Lions. Like, not even really going too much into it. We just beat UAPB. Then we play at Baylor, where, yeah, unfortunately, last time we played Baylor, it was very, very mind-numbingly annoying. And I'm really curious to see how the offense looks with the new running backs, new wide receiver group in as well, too. Seeing how Derek Mason's defense does as well. But I unfortunately think that's one of the games that we lose. I think that just at Baylor is just not Oklahoma State's game to win. So then I kind of glossed over that one a little bit, but at Baylor, Baylor's good. Baylor might win the Big 12 this year. I know Patrick and Will earlier said that they're seeing a Big 12 matchup of championship games of a repeat of the OU Texas Red River rivalry, but I see Baylor just having a pretty darn good season. So I do see Oklahoma State unfortunately losing to Baylor.
Can I clarify something, Calvin?
Yeah, of course.
Okay, I don't think Texas will make the Big 12 championship game.
I was going to say,
right.
I didn't actually remember Will saying that.
Yeah. Well, Will saying OU makes Big 12 championship game. Is that fair?
I believe that is a quite possible outcome. I think Baylor would be the other contestant in that game. But
that's fair.
I'll let you get back to OSU.
Yeah, okay, thanks. So Texas Tech at home. I think Oklahoma State wins that game. I don't necessarily know if there's too much to talk about it because we've talked about Texas Tech already a couple different times. At TCU, that's a game that generally trips up Oklahoma State just because it's a weird game overall, but we beat at TCU. We win at TCU. Texas for homecoming. Sorry, Patrick. I do agree with you, though. I think we beat Texas. Homecoming in Stillwater, so sorry I think you lose, but you also predicted that, so not too sorry necessarily.
Yeah, I think that pick for me is kind of representative of like, I think Texas drops a game to a pretty darn good Big 12 team, whether it's Baylor or whether it's Oklahoma State. I think I took Oklahoma State as that loss because it's on the road. I just think it's tough.
I do notice how you didn't say a pretty good team like OU. So you're saying OU's not that good, which I agree. I mean,
I think OU is a good team.
I'm looking for any value system to really just give Will a little bit of a hard time here. I
understand my Big 12 tiers of teams might be a little bit unclear.
That's fair.
Yeah,
that's fair. Then after that one, we go at K-State and at KU. I think that K-State game, like Will said earlier, will be a tough game, but I still am picking Oklahoma State against K-State. We've lost at K-State before. I mean, I think since Sanders has been on the roster, we've lost at K-State, but I feel like it's a win. At KU, again, feel like it's a win. Last year we just destroyed them at home, but I think it doesn't matter. It's KU. The Iowa State game, without Brock Purdy kind of giving us a fit. Last year we lost Iowa State by 3, and controversial kind of ending there too that Jake and I went on and on about for a whole entire hour on a podcast. I think we beat Iowa State at home, more or less. Then, weird enough, Bedlam is not the last game of the season for OU or OSU this year. And
I don't like scheduling.
Yeah, and I'm not a huge fan of it because that means it's much harder for me to go to the game because it's not Thanksgiving weekend. But
definitely, yeah.
That's a personal issue. I think we beat OU. I think we beat OU at OU. Right now, I'm going on a tangent here where I'm saying Oklahoma State goes 11-1, and the reasons why I think we could beat OU at OU is just one. Honestly, I think it helps out for Oklahoma State. That's not the last game of the season. I just whenever Bedlam is the last game of the season, which it almost always has been from what I can remember, it's been at least nice to kind of go, okay, well, you know what, like, we're going to the game without every single starter coming back from injury for OU, or whenever we played at OU 2 years ago, and you guys had like Ramondre Stevenson come off suspension, right? I may have that wrong, but there was another guy who came off suspension as well, who just ended up destroying us. And of course, like, our starting quarterback and our backup quarterback ended up getting injured in that game. Shane Illingworth and Spencer Sanders got injured in Bedlam 2 years ago. That's going to throw our plans sideways a little bit, but we never even looked like we were in a fair fight. I mean, it just looked like Stevenson was throwing us to the ground every chance he got, too.
What? I'm blanking on the defensive end's name that
Ronnie Perkins.
Yeah.
Yes, thank you.
He did unspeakable things to Spencer Sanders in that game. I remember it clearly. It was pretty great.
I mean, Sanders was injured, so I mean that. But,
exactly.
Yeah, it's kind of what happens, right? So I think we'll beat OU. I feel pretty good about it. This seems to me much more like an 02, 03 back-to-back years we beat OU, which is like a highlight I have that I can barely remember, but it was when I was in second and third grade. And as an Oklahoma State fan, like any year you beat OU, yeah, it's annoying, but it is kind of like winning the Big 12 championship in a way. I mean, one of the years we beat OU in the Big 12 championship was to win the Big 12 championship, 44-10 back in 2011. And I actually need to update my record here. The last 20 years, Oklahoma State is 5-15 against OU. Not a lot better than 4-16, but still, I'll take it. I got a good feeling about this. When OU is in a TBD position, we're saying there's a range of 9-3 to 11-1. That still is a really good OU team, don't get me wrong. But fingers crossed, it kind of works out for OSU, right? Things fall our way. That's kind of where I'm going with this game. I just think things could fall our way. It could happen where we could win again. Spencer Sanders did beat OU last year, and I wouldn't say necessarily it was a bunch of just him winning, but there are so many defensive linemen that returned back for Oklahoma State this year. Our secondary, 7 guys are getting replaced in the secondary of guys who just played a lot of minutes last year and a lot of games. Not all starters, but we've got Colin Oliver, who was tied for leading the league, Big 12 Conference, in sacks last year as being a freshman. He's coming back. We've got Brock Purdy coming back. We've got several other guys on the defense coming back as well, too, which...
Brock Martin.
Thank you. Yeah, of course. Patrick looked at me in a second. I said that, too. I should have known. But
I couldn't think of the right guy. I was like, wait, Brock Purdy, ready?
Yeah, definitely not a defensive lineman for Oklahoma.
And then Trace Ford should be healthy as well.
Trace Ford should be healthy, who was known as possibly a top 3-round NFL draft pick if he had been healthy last year and gone to the draft. So a lot of good things for Oklahoma State going that way, and that's why I think we'll beat OU at OU. West Virginia game, I think we win that one at home. Thank goodness that one is at home, because if we beat OU at OU, then if we had to go all the way to West Virginia the next weekend, I would almost count that as a loss because of a letdown game. But I think we beat West Virginia at home, and we make it to the Big 12 championship. I'm saying Oklahoma State goes 11-1, only loses at Baylor. And then I feel confident picking it for, I guess, a couple of reasons, but mainly it's by the time we play OU, we should have our stuff together. The same thing can be said for OU too. Like exact same thing could be said. OU's offense will be clicking at full strength then. They'll be all together, just all up to speed. Any issues there are from earlier on the season of just knowing how stuff works from a new head coach and a new offensive coordinator will be figured out for OU. But I really hope and I don't want to say praying or anything like that, but I'm hoping and wishing that Oklahoma State's offense will be better this year than it was last year. Because last year was just not the normal Oklahoma State offense of run and gun, throw up as many points as possible, except for the KU game. And fingers crossed here, but I know it's a big prediction saying Oklahoma State again wins 11 or more games. But anyways, I don't know. I want to hear what Will and Patrick, whoever wants to go first, what do you guys have to say too?
Yeah, I mean, I don't have a ton to add. I think 11-1 is a little insane. I will also say for the record, I think we three have, and I realize I just said my team goes 11-1, but I do think for the record that we have the three best teams in the Big 12 here for this upcoming year. I don't necessarily value Baylor as much as you guys, although I agree Aranda's an awesome coach. And like, if you look at the Big 12 stats from last year, it's like Oklahoma State rightfully got a ton of credit for having a spectacular defense last year, but Baylor's was right there. Like those were clearly the two best defenses in the Big 12. I think they each gave up 18 points a game. Like that's unheard of low for the Big 12. Like that's so impressive. I'm just not convinced Baylor's going to be able to score any points. So I think Oklahoma State, I think 9-3. I think a 9-3 season is right on the money for them.
What are you thinking, Will?
It's like I'm pretty in lockstep with Patrick on that, actually. I think there's a pretty clear top tier in the conference. I think Baylor's up there too as well. I'm pretty high on Baylor, as y'all might have caught on to by now. I think 9-3 is pretty doable. I think Baylor, I'm with you on that, Calvin. I think that's an Oklahoma State loss at Baylor. Just on the road, I don't think the game day environment is anything crazy down there, but home field does count, especially in a slugfest like that. Not too worried about, obviously, the first three games. I won't even make a joke about Central Michigan because I don't think I think that's an easy win for OSU. Not too worried about Tech. TCU, that's kind of a weird place to play. I don't know too much about the history with Oklahoma State playing away at TCU, but I also don't really see that happening. Texas could very well be a homecoming loss. I don't like it when teams lose at homecoming. It just kind of really kills the vibe. I know how big of a deal homecoming is in Stillwater, but I think by then we will know what Texas is as a team, and if they look good, I think they win that game. So I'll go ahead and count that as a Texas win. K-State, I know we've been pretty high on them, but I think Oklahoma State beats them. I like the DC hire. I can't remember his name, but I think he's pretty good. And shout out to him for getting out of the absolute dumpster fire that is Auburn. Derek Mason, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I think that's a great hire. Shout out to him for getting out of Auburn. That's a great career move for him. But I think you do win at K-State. Kansas, we're not talking about Texas. We don't need to even dignify that with any talk further beyond that. Iowa State's a win. Again, I think Bedlam's a win. I'm pretty confident about that. We can agree to disagree on that, of course, as I would hope we would. West Virginia's a win, so I'd say 9-3.
Yeah,
well, that's a good team. That's a good record. I mean,
it is a good team.
I guarantee Oklahoma State's going to win their bowl game because it's a good team. So 10-win season. That's And
I got to say, beating Notre Dame the way we did in the PlayStation Fiesta Bowl,
that was a great game.
That was a phenomenal game, and that's against a.
Did you go, Calvin?
I did.
Awesome.
Yeah, drove over because it was only in Arizona. So hopefully Oklahoma State can keep playing on the West Coast. But hopefully next year it's the national championship game in the West Coast and SoFi. I will say the weird parts of Oklahoma State fandom of like, okay, how did we do previously? Why am I worried or whatever about a certain game? It's because like at K-State 2 years ago we won by 2. The score's 28-18. And at TCU we lost 29-22. So it's just there are games where we just, I don't want to say slip up, take our eye off the ball or whatever it may be, but the OU game is one of those where every single year, right before we play OU, I go, you know what? I just don't see it. I'm just not feeling that confident. Then all of a sudden record that, preview podcast with Jake or whatever. And for whatever reason, I'm like, you know what? This Oklahoma State team, I can see it. And I'm kind of in that boat right now. I don't know if I know that'll change between now and then, but I'm really hopeful about this Oklahoma State team. This is one of the years where I'm way more hopeful about the Oklahoma State team coming back than I at least think I have been previously. And I don't necessarily know if there's a huge reason for me to go Oklahoma State takes a step back. The defensive coordinator changes. Yeah, guys are changing from the defensive, side of the football. But it's like instead of Malcolm Rodriguez playing, we've got Jason Taylor, who has been playing for a while and gotten a lot of snaps for Oklahoma State over the years too. So it's not as though we're just a huge drop off on the defensive backside. It's not great. I wish we could have kept some of those guys who transferred out of the program, but it's not that big of a drop off as it has been previously when we've lost guys on the defensive side. I've gone, oh my gosh, what are we going to do? And it's odd also for me to talk about Oklahoma State defense as much as I have been, because normally that's never been the deal. It's been Whedon to Blackman, 12 years ago. It's been, Mason Rudolph to James Washington for, 5-6 years ago, whatever it was now too. So it's weird to talk about Oklahoma State's defense as much as I am, but at the same point, I think the defense could be the thing that anchors this team a little bit and gets us through a couple of those close games again this season earlier on, and then carries us towards that OU game where we break into a 2-minute drill and we score right before halftime like we did in the Fiesta Bowl, and all of a sudden we're doing just a different offensive scheme and seeing what works and trying something different. Because I'll tell you what, if the Oklahoma State team that played Baylor last year at Baylor, at the Big 12 Championship game shows up again, I'm not picking us to beat OU. But if it's the same team that shows up that plays OU at home, or that plays when it was Baylor at home, or that plays in the Fiesta Bowl in the second half at least, then I am picking Oklahoma State, right? I'm only picking Oklahoma State here if we do really good, but that's just also to show OU is always that team and sets that bar of, okay, if we beat OU, then it means this. And I really wish it wasn't like that. I really wish it was like, all right, yeah, I just think we're going to win because, historically we've beaten them, but that's just not the case. I have to give OU the credit and respect that they, at this point, deserve. I don't know why I wouldn't say it that way. What are you thinking, Jake? What's your prediction here?
I'm never high on us going into the football season. I'm slightly concerned. There were like multiple Gundy game candidates last year. And I've unironically coined that term, multiple Gundy game candidates last year, which Jim Knowles bailed us out of. And we don't have that person. Boise State, again, easily could have been in a game. Actually, no, we did have a Gundy game, and it was in the Big 12 Championship. That was it. But for all intents and purposes, I think we were objectively a better football team than Baylor last year. But I think in the Big 12 Championship game, we got out-coached. I think that's pretty much what happened. Because, like Will said, I think Dave Aranda probably is the best coach. Now, I don't know if I'm as high on Baylor, but just looking at their roster, but also, like, it seems like Dave Aranda can make just water into wine type of stuff. Like, he can clearly do some things that other coaches might not be able to do. I would probably go the 9-3, 10-2 route. I'm not going to predict us beating OU, and I would probably say that we lose to Baylor. I think we are a better team than Baylor, but again, I think going to Waco, probably get out coached. All that kind of stuff. I'm concerned about the secondary, concerned about the defense a little bit. I think Derek Mason's a great coach, but he might have some entrance growing pains because the schemes tend to differ a lot and all that stuff. And it's hard for me to go into a season and have faith in Spencer Sanders. I mean, that's just, how many years has it been? 5? It's been 5 years, right?
I'm trying to go. Yeah, I think it is 5 now. Yeah, with his red shirt year.
Yeah, not one of them have I been confident going into with him as our starting quarterback. Because, like I said to Patrick earlier, OSU typically is you beat the teams you're better than and lose to the teams you're worse than. Now, they're better than most of the teams in the Big 12, which is great, but the reason they're not is because of Spencer Sanders. If they're not beating OU, it's because they have Taylor Cornelius at quarterback. Oh, it happened.
Shane Illingworth is still on the roster, correct?
Yeah, He actually transferred into Nevada.
Oh, never mind.
Basically, yeah. I mean, Sanders is a redshirt junior, by the way. So he's been with Oklahoma State since 2018, but he's a redshirt junior. Well, he's
COVID year.
Yeah.
Oh.
I can go into it more, but yeah. I mean, he's played three.
Number 2 right now.
I mean, he's played 3 seasons for Oklahoma State. He started in 2019, getting stats.
I feel like I'm being suffocated with a pillow every 5 seconds when he's on my football roster.
So last year, just because anyone who's listened to several of the Oklahoma State podcasts last year knows that at several points I was like, hey, can we see Shane Illingworth again? Like the Boise State game was like, what's Shane doing, right? Then you learn that all of the receivers for Oklahoma State got COVID or were in COVID protocols besides one. And you learn like several other things too. And then the end of the season, like Blake Shapen plays a better game as the Baylor backup quarterback in the Big 12 championship than Spencer Sanders does, for sure. But Spencer Sanders was first team All Big 12 last year. So even though Brock Purdy had more passing yards, et cetera, too. And of course, Iowa State kind of fell off at the end. But I'm not a huge Spencer Sanders fan. That's been said before. It's just the guy's not that bad, I guess I would say. And I understand not feeling super comfortable with him. And his touchdown to interception rate is not pretty. I mean, he's got 50 touchdowns to 31 interceptions through 3 seasons. Granted, he hasn't played a full year for 2 of those previous seasons, but last year he did. There's just
the one thing, the Derek Mason stuff aside, I want to stick on the offense for a second because that is my one cause for concern. If we don't have that, then we probably won't be a very good football team because that's the one thing that OSU is usually pretty good at. I'm intrigued to know if Casey Dunn actually gets the reins this year because last year, there were multiple times where I text you or text Will, and you being Calvin, I would text you guys and be like, "Hey, man, Casey Dunn isn't calling plays right now." And that happened pretty frequently because as soon as I see us run counter, jet sweep, and then a power, and I'm like, yeah, what are we doing? Like it's 3rd and 8 and we're running a quarterback draw? That's Mike Gundy.
I can confirm I've received many of those texts from Jake.
Same here. I just almost always watch the game tape delayed, so I receive them and then I try to track back what it was.
But there are just times where it's like I can see our offense clicking, and then there are times where I'm like, "What's it's like what do we do? What's going on? Like why?" I guarantee that those 7 plays that were called on the goal line against Baylor were not called by our actual offensive coordinator. Because it would actually take Pete Carroll to call 7 straight plays over and over and over again. Just kidding, he didn't do that. But
he threw a passing play. That's the most famous mess up he's had ever. Right.
Right. But it just, we were, and that's why I say we got out coached because we did. That's ultimately what happened, and I'm concerned to know how Mike Gundy is going to operate when we don't have one of the best defenses in the Big 12, because I think, as most of us would agree, that was the outlier from OSU this past year, and I don't know if it's going to be the outlier for OSU this year.
So some Sanders just stats here. It's tough to look through here and go, oh, okay, he's always been good, because in 2020 he played 9 games and he had 8 interceptions. In 2021 he played 13 games and then 12 interceptions, right? So it's just not. He does about the same every year. His passing percentage is almost the exact same. It's 62% for the last 3 seasons, and in fact it's 62%. And then 62.8 and then 62.8 again. So I feel better about Sanders going into year 4 than I did going into year 3. Say it that way, but I don't think Sanders has to
low.
I don't think Sanders has to be the guy who is a Heisman Trophy candidate for us to go 11-1. And I think that has a lot to do with our defense and a lot to do with our play calling. But what Dominic Richardson is one of the best running backs, like top 70 running backs. So I mean, it's not that great, but top 70 running backs in college football. We've already got another guy, Ollie Gordon, coming in too, who's a true freshman who might get some snaps running back, or I think will. We've got
he probably will.
We've got wide receiver guys coming in who are new as well too. Our offensive line should theoretically be a little bit better than last year, at least barring injuries again. I don't know how Spencer Sanders will do. No one does, but I'm not betting Oklahoma State's 11-1 record on Spencer Sanders getting us to 11-1. I'm betting it more on him getting us out of some tight spots in a couple of games, but also our defense doing the same, and also our running backs doing the same, and also our wide receivers doing the same, right? Like, we didn't see Jaylen Warren at all coming into the season being good, and all of a sudden that was the dude. And for better or for worse, I think that could be the same thing we say again for Oklahoma State this year. There's a guy who will pop up, be pretty darn good, and our defense will hold stand, at least. And if our defense could hold stand against Baylor a couple more times, but also, I mean, we held them 21 points. We should be able to beat them. It's just that Fiesta Bowl victory gives me a lot more hope than the Big 12 championship game did, or even the OU game, to be honest. Like the Fiesta Bowl, I feel like we won that game. Whereas Bedlam, I feel like we definitely won, but a couple things also broke our way for that to work out too. So I'm feeling confident heading to an Oklahoma State football season. Doesn't normally happen, but I'll take it. Patrick's feeling very confident about Texas.
I was going to say, I'm over here just faking it till I make it. Like I already know Texas is going to let me down. I'm choosing to aim for the stars this time. Shoot for the moon.
Yeah, shoot for the stars, land on the moon, right?
I think it's the other way, but yes.
Well,
I think you shoot for the moon, and if you miss, you might land on a star.
That does not actually make any astronomical sense, but I just I think you're right. I think that is how the saying goes.
I think that is what the saying is.
The saying is definitely shoot for the moon.
It may not apply to Texas in either case. Yeah.
It's a former science museum employee. I have to say that. I'm hopeful with Oklahoma State. I'll say it that way. We right now are an hour and 20 minutes into the podcast, though, so I'm going to say let's just go ahead and break this into 2 parts. I was supposed to take up Will's entire evening because he is in Central Time Zone. So go ahead and,
I'm off tomorrow. We can roll for a while.
Well, I'm just going to say let's break this in 2 parts, take a little bit of a break here, and we'll be back here in 5 minutes if that works. Again, thank you so much for listening to the latest episode of the CGA Tour Podcast. Please follow at CGA Tour on Twitter and Instagram for more. And we'll catch you guys again soon.